Thank you for staying with us at the Shiftwork Summit. We are in the last 3 sessions, and this one is particularly exciting for me because when I started talking with Shiftwork marketplaces, I started talking to product managers, engineering managers, ops managers, and there are two words that strike fear in the heart of every manager in a Shiftwork marketplace. And those two words are no-show. When a worker signs up for a shift and does not show up, does not call, this is an egg on the face for the Shiftwork marketplace. They lose the revenue and can also lose the customer. So it's one of the most important problems here. We have, with Shiftwork marketplace, brought amazing freedom and flexibility in the hands of 50 million workers across all industries. They can choose where they work, when they work, and how much they get paid for it. But with great power comes great responsibility. When you have hundreds of thousands of workers going from their homes to thousands of customer locations, the platform must rely on automation to validate the workers showing up on time, and then spend the time that they are paid for to make sure that they actually spend the time that they're paid for on site doing the work. The impact of a no-show or a shift abandonment, especially acute in healthcare, where this involves human lives and well-being. Join me as I welcome HyperTrack's VP of Engineering Saurabh Das. Saurabh helps our largest marketplaces validate shifts at scale. In this talk, Saurabh will give you an idea, a peek under the hood, and share insights on what he has learned from managing millions, over 3 million shifts a year for healthcare and industry alone. So over to you, Saurabh. The stage is all yours.
Thanks, Gaurav. Hi, everyone. Hope you're having a good Shiftwork Summit so far. We're going to talk about the secret to no-show detection, and spoiler, it's essentially location reliability. And while the lessons here are generally applicable, we're talking about healthcare because all the numbers and statistics here are taken from our few customers in this sector. So in that way, it's specific. So, you already know the secret, but well, let's go through it anyway. So, Shiftwork marketplaces in general, whether it's healthcare or not, you work with a guarantee that you're going to get the service that, you're signing up for. The person is going to show up and stay there for however long the shift is. And shift workers are becoming an essential part of the workforce in many companies, and therefore it's critical for these businesses to have reliability in order to plan and execute their businesses correctly. So, what I'm basically saying is that it's really important to make sure that the person shows up and that they stay there. At the same time, some stats are somewhat shocking, which is that almost half of all US employees admit to time theft, and it's like a $11 billion problem. And that doesn't even include mistakes. So this is, it's even higher than that. But at the same time, there's like a real pressure, that if you have to guarantee the quality of workers, you have to go through an expensive process to make sure that, they fit a quality bar. So, quality of workers, miscommunications, and bad actors all essentially really stress the system for shift workers more than regular full-time employees. And therefore, it's even more important to make sure that the surprise no-shows, the surprise shift abandonment issues, those must be reduced and tackled in some way. And location intelligence is one of the ways you can tackle it. It is one of the key ways in which a lot of marketplaces are tackling the problem, when it shows up. So let's have a look at, what you do in the, in a case or what you'd like to do to sort of add location intelligence to your marketplace. And, as we said, pre-shift, before the shift starts, the main risk is no-shows. So you want to kind of track their location. If they're not going to show up, you backfill it. Similarly, once they arrive, they're working, you track their location constantly. And if they leave the shift without an alert, you have the option of backfilling, alert the customer, etc. And that sounds reasonable. So so you want to do that. Now there are quite a few options to add location intelligence into your sort of app right now. So you have geofence SDKs. You could also think about building it in-house. And of course, there's HyperTrack. All of them have, target some use cases, and have some advantages and disadvantages. And, it sounds pretty easy, right? We get this done, we'll add this, and we'll have our locations. But there are, of course, a bunch of other things to think about that impact whether you actually get the location. Things like you need to wake the devices up remotely. So that is there in both your in-house solutions as well as if you use geofence SDK kind of solution. You also need to be able to minimize the battery consumption. Otherwise, your workers aren't going to agree to track your shifts. You also don't want to track it when they don't expect to be tracked, because that's a they lose faith in the app and they stop giving the permissions. You also need to be able to detect permission changes for various reasons, but also for fraud cases where people are likely to change the permissions before they sort of do something that you don't want them to do. There's also adversarial issues, mock locations, all kinds of things there. But the biggest chunk of work falls into this category of, we have two main OSs, and one of them has thousands of different kinds of devices, and each one has its own quirks. It's, you have to do a little bit of work here and there to make sure that sort of each of them is tracking correctly. So that's the other thing that you have to deal with. So, there's a good amount of work that goes into it, but you can do that and you start tracking. But then there's more nuanced questions around, the intelligence portion of it, like, the mobile device isn't moving. So are they actually standing still, or did they lose coverage, or did they turn off their permissions? What's going on there? And they're at the edge of the facility. So should I mark them as a no-show? Should I think that they're still going to come? Like, what do you do? The other one, which we see very frequently, is you're watching on the map and they take a detour. And does this detour mean that they're not going to show up, or does it mean that they're getting a coffee before their shift? And it's a hard problem to solve, this one. And there are other things, adversarial issues I mentioned, like are they turning off their tracking because their battery is low, or is it because they want to abandon the shift and therefore they're going to track it off and then leave? And the other one is that you're trying to track your shifts and get to no-show detection, but you start getting locations only when the worker arrives at the shift. So what's going on there? So all these kinds of questions need to be dealt with. And say you do that and you start tracking your workers, and you get to a place where you say that 90% of my shifts are being tracked. For some definition of being tracked is the key, because you see that even though 90% of your shifts are tracked, you get only 10% of no-shows being detected correctly. At the same time, you have 80% false positive no-shows. And you also notice that even though 90% of your shifts are tracked, only 50% of abandoned shifts are being detected. So despite having sort of good tracking and spending a lot of effort doing that, you don't get the business outcomes that you want here. And the brute force implementation with geofence SDK that gives you locations, it typically gives you something like this. And because waking up devices reliably is a hard problem. So yeah, I mean, how do you explain this? And you explain this by thinking about your metric. You're looking at 80% shifts tracked, but that could happen even after the shift starts. What you need to do is look at, what happened before the shift starts, and how long before the shift started it happened. So the blue line you see here is a line that shows you how your devices in your fleet woke up, typically, as you started attempting to track them. So as you can see, after shift starts, you eventually reach a number which looks very rosy. You see 80% of your shifts are tracked. But it took a really long time to get there. You tracked them for 90 minutes. And when the shift started, So after 90 minutes are over, you're still only tracking something like 65, 70% of your shifts. And, but you actually want to detect your no-show somewhere here around 1 hour before your shift starts so that you can actually backfill on time. So this region kind of gives you 10% of your no-shows. And that's kind of what we're seeing in the previous metric, right? So where we want to get to is, HyperTrack has spent a lot of effort trying to wake up devices. Waking up devices is a hard problem, but with all the work that we've done, we get a curve like this. It's pretty typical for many of our customers. And around an hour before, you kind of wake up 75% of your devices. Gives you a good chance of detecting a no-show. And what you do see is that indeed you get about 30% more no-shows detected, in this region. So you kind of get to around 40% directly here. And on top of this, there needs to be more work to get it to 60, 70%. But even, if you look at this much, there is a little bit extra that you can get directly from HyperTrack. And the key here is that there are times when you can reach a device and you still can't get a location. So out here, the blue line gives you when you are able to get a location for the first time from the device. But the yellow line, which is almost coincidental, tells you that there are some devices which you could reach, but you couldn't get a location from them, most often because the location permissions were denied. And they seem pretty close. There's like hardly a percent or two between them. So we probably have to go and zoom in to see if there's any difference. But what we do know is that 10% of your no-shows come from this 1 to 2% additional piece of information. So yeah, I mean it's a small number in terms of your overall shifts, but it's a very large number when it comes to the proportion of no-shows. So what we're saying is fleet visibility, even without location, is an important piece of the puzzle. And HyperTrack, in its mission to serve the shift work marketplace, essentially breaks down reasons for not being able to reach your devices into various categories. And for the first three, we have these are the ones in green. Your ops managers can get in touch with the users and get them to change settings or tell them not to close the app or whatever else and get them to resolve these. So these are resolvable. And the other two, the reachability stuff, can be resolved by talking to your developers, typically around push notifications and stuff and other features. So I think the key here is that this bit gives you a good 10% additional no-shows. And it's even more stark when you think about shift abandonment, where people are often likely to switch their sort of devices off or stop giving permissions just before they abandon a shift. So having these signals, even if you don't have the location, is a very important piece of knowing that. And a part of this also is knowing whether the device disconnected and turned off, or is it just unreachable right now? So HyperTrack tries very hard to also give you clarity about that piece of it. So you put all these together and you can get to a good amount of your NCNS detected pretty easily. On top of that, you have to get better algorithms, get better machine learning stuff going for your specific problem, and you can get to much higher numbers once you sort of start tackling it from that angle. So with this, the trifecta of improving no-show detection is essentially focus on the time to first event, how quickly you can wake up your devices, actionable outages, so information about why your devices aren't tracking right now, and tracking consistency, which is once you start tracking, do you continue tracking? So this is a problem often faced with in-house solutions where you're able to get it to start tracking reasonably well, but then it gets turned off for various reasons. So you have to work hard at also ensuring that it stays tracking and the OS doesn't throttle your app, etc. So that's the other part of it. And actionable outages also has another important part, which is that it gives you recommendations about what you can do to, improve the health of your fleet. So you can tell your users to. So if you know that your users are closing the app, you kind of have to tell them not to do so, or change your flow so that it's not, so they don't close it as often. Or on the other hand, if you notice that push notifications are an issue, then you have to tell your developers to change the flow there. So we categorize our outages and give recommendations on what you can do to sort of improve the tracking health of your fleet at an overall level, and that helps push the theoretical limit of how much NCNS you can detect higher and higher. So we haven't discussed tracking consistency much here, but I guess you can take you can take a stab at that. It looks like things like OS is killing the app because it's taking too many resources, or incorrect permissions, or too much resource consumption, etc. And HyperTrack looks at some of these issues and provides guidance, but also in some cases where you're unable to solve it, our mobile team is able to provide insight into why your app is crashing, for example, when they have nothing to do with the HyperTrack SDK. So, it's, I said path to improving no-show detection, but it's a considerable amount of work, but it's pretty valuable. And, you have to work both on the location piece of it as well as sort of algorithms and ML to detect the no-shows that are relevant for you. It's hard work, but it is very doable. We've seen a lot of customers who've been very successful with this whole effort. And I'm gonna sort of leave you with some of the words of our customers. To quote Mike Cook, who's really pushed us to improve the reliability and robustness of our platform, and he's ensured that we've left our platform in a very good place now. He said that we're seeing significantly improved location data reliability with HyperTrack, and it was great to work with the team here to get to this stage. Also, I want to really thank Jason, who's helped me think through this presentation, and also about the whole problem and how we can sort of address and modify our platform to work really well for healthcare marketplaces. And Jason sees the Clipboard as a leader in the technology portion of the shift work movement, and hopefully he'll be here next year presenting at the shift work summit himself. Yeah, so I mean, that's the key to it. How do you, there's a certain amount of learned helplessness around no-show detection. A lot of people have told us that, and the key to overcoming it is just reliable live location tracking. A lot of effort has to go into it, but it does yield results at the end. And I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions, so with that, throwing the floor open.
Yeah, there are quite a few questions. Saurabh, first of all, thanks a lot for taking the time to walk us through this. It's wonderful to see a engineer's testimonials from customers. You work with multiple customers. Clipboard Health is awesome. Nursa, one of the other customers in healthcare we work with, presented earlier as a part of the ShiftWork Summit. One question related to the tracking. You mentioned that tracking rate improves dramatically with HyperTrack. Can you talk about why many of the shift work marketplaces here are using location tracking without very good results? Can you talk about what's the difference between those first generation location tracking technologies and what HyperTrack provides?
Yeah, so I think there is a specific need to understand the metrics that you want to track, and and sort of separate out the tracking rate metrics from the business impact metrics. And by separate out, what I mean is that the tracking rate metrics without addressing the business impact metrics is not very helpful. So each customer, so there are myriad of problems in the tracking space, and things can go wrong in hundreds of ways, right? And each of these sub-problems needs effort to solve. Um, and for different customers, a different subset of problems is relevant. Solving all of them yourself is very hard. And that's where HyperTrack is, has a leg up, because we see the problems of a lot of different parties, and we've spent the effort to sort of, handle those edge cases. So it's all about the effort you want to put in, right? It's HyperTrack is not, in a way, it's not got magic technology under the hood that is different from what you call first generation tracking, doing it in-house. It's the same kind of techniques. It's just that there are so many places you can get stuck, and it's hard to navigate those spaces. And HyperTrack, just by having done this for this amount of time and having a sort of overarching view, is able to get to all these corners and resolve all of them one by one. And it's the hard work that needs to be put in, and that's the difference here.
Excellent. Thank you, Saurabh. Next question is about the time to first event. You mentioned that term.
Yeah.
There was a clarification question about that from the audience. Can you classify that a little bit further, and how that relates to the no-shows and how that factors into the overall flow?
Absolutely. Let me go back here. So time to first event, essentially, so there's time to first location and time to first event. So look, what are we trying to do, or where do we start? We started at, if we know the location of the worker, we can detect no-show risk. And you did that, and you got the blue line here, which is that you try to wake your entire, when you have a shift at 10 o'clock, 1.5 hours before that, you try to wake up the device. You do that, and you get this kind of a curve which says that this is the statistical property of my fleet. It's kind of waking up in this manner. Now, so that's time to first location. What we realize is that there are often times when we're able to wake up the device so we can reach the device, but the device is unwilling to give us a location. It is either in an outage state, or it's in a constantly disconnected state, or a whole bunch of other issues. There are many reasons why you could reach the device at times, but you can't get a location from them. So time to first event essentially is that state where you've reached the device at least once. You know that you've been able to successfully ping the device, but you can't get information from the device. So what's going wrong here? And it turns out that we are able to get information about why we're not getting information, even in many cases. So that piece of information about why you're not able to get location data is often very telling about no-show risk or other risk. And by using that sensibly, we can that has it's a very small number of devices. If you think about it, it's just always like 1 or 2% of your fleet that would have time to first event, but not a location. But those few percent of your fleet are sort of very crucial in terms of are a very high percentage of risks. So those tend to be workers who have a high risk profile. Did I get the question, or was there like something slightly different in there that I could?
No, that's perfect. No, that's perfect. Thank you, Saurabh. That was wonderful. There are a lot of shiftwork marketplaces here as a part of the community and as a part of the audience. If you're looking to look at location intelligence and manage no-shows effectively with HyperTrack, feel free to reach out to us. You can just write to us at marketing@hypertrack.com. You can also reach out to Saurabh directly. Saurabh, you want to just give people your email address at HyperTrack so that they can reach out to you with a question directly, engineer to engineer?
Sure, it's Saurabh@hypertrack.com, spelled SAURABH. Saurabh@hypertrack.com. If the mail bounces, reach out to anyone in HyperTrack and they'll connect us.
That is wonderful. I'm also putting it in the chat here, Saurabh's email address, so that you guys can reach out to him. I know that engineers always like to talk to engineers directly. That's why I'm providing that.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Saurabh. That's beautiful.
Certainly. Always happy to talk to engineering folks. It's always exciting. Thanks so
Very
much.
much.